can't just sit here all day without buying anything.
I'm eating lunch. I bought this food 10 minutes ago. I've been watching you. You look like you're up to something.
Up to something? I'm a Navy SEAL. I'm eating a hamburger.
Sure you are, and I'm Chuck Norris. Let's go.
You're making a serious mistake.
27-year-old David Carter had survived 3 combat tours in Afghanistan, earned 2 Bronze Stars and a Navy Cross, and completed some of the most classified operations in U.S. military history. He'd been back stateside for exactly 72 hours, finally granted the leave he'd been promised after 18 months of continuous deployment. All he wanted was to eat lunch at the mall where he'd hung out as a teenager, maybe buy some civilian clothes, and remember what normal life felt like before reporting back to base. Quick check before we move on: where in the world are you watching from? Drop it below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time to do it so you don't miss the next part. We cover stories you won't see in mainstream media. By subscribing, you ensure these stories finally get heard. The Westfield Shopping Center in Carter's hometown of Richmond, Virginia, was exactly as he remembered it. Same stores, same food court, same families wandering around with shopping bags. It felt surreal after months of desert compounds and midnight raids. He'd chosen a corner table in the food court, ordered from the hamburger place his mom used to take him to, and was simply enjoying the normalcy of eating a meal without checking for snipers or listening for incoming mortars. But Scott Anderson had been watching him from the moment he sat down. Anderson had worked mall security for 6 years. In that time, he'd developed very specific ideas about who belonged in Westfield Shopping Center and who didn't. The mall served an affluent suburb, and Anderson saw himself as the guardian of that affluence. He'd made 17 reports about suspicious individuals in the past year alone. 16 of those reports involved minorities. Management had spoken to him twice about his pattern of complaints, but Anderson insisted he was just being thorough. When Anderson spotted Carter sitting alone, wearing jeans and a green polo shirt, something in his mind triggered. Black man, sitting by himself, not shopping, just watching people. Anderson had seen enough crime shows to know this looked like someone casing the place, planning something, maybe waiting for accomplices. He'd circled past Carter's table 3 times in 10 minutes before deciding to act. "Sir, I need to see some identification," Anderson demanded, pulling out his radio. Carter reached into his wallet and produced his military ID, holding it out clearly. The card showed his photo, rank, and Navy SEAL designation in official Department of Defense formatting. Master Chief David Carter, U.S. Navy. I'm on leave. Anderson barely glanced at the card. Anyone can get these printed online. I need real ID. The absurdity of the statement hit Carter like a physical blow. His military ID was among the most secure identification documents in the country, featuring multiple authentication measures, holographic seals, and direct access to Pentagon databases. Suggesting it was fake was like claiming the Statue of Liberty was inflatable. This is real ID. You can verify it through any law enforcement database. I don't have time for games. You need to leave, now. Other diners had begun to notice the confrontation. A family at the next table stopped eating to stare. Teenagers at a corner booth pulled out their phones. An elderly couple near the pizza counter whispered to each other while glancing over. Carter stood slowly, his 6'2" frame and obvious military bearing making Anderson step back slightly. 8 years of special operations training had given Carter a presence that most people instinctively respected, but Anderson was too committed to his assumptions to back down. "Sir, you're making a mistake. I'm a decorated Navy SEAL on authorized leave. I have every right to be here." "Decorated, huh?" Anderson's voice dripped with skepticism. "What's next? You're going to tell me you've got medals?" Carter's jaw tightened. He'd earned his decorations through actions that remained classified, operations that had saved American lives and disrupted terrorist networks. Having those sacrifices mocked by a mall security guard felt worse than taking fire from enemy positions. "I've served 3 combat tours in Afghanistan. I've put my life on the line for this country more times than I can count, and you're harassing me for eating lunch." Anderson keyed his radio. "This is Anderson at the food court. I need backup. Got a suspicious individual refusing to cooperate." The radio crackled back. "Copy that, Scott. Mall management and PD en route." Carter closed his eyes briefly, recognizing the moment when a situation spirals beyond control. He'd seen it in military operations when intelligence was wrong. when assumptions led to civilian casualties, when good intentions produced terrible outcomes. The difference was that in combat zones, there were rules of engagement designed to prevent exactly this kind of mistake. Here in suburban Virginia, eating lunch while black had apparently become grounds for suspicious behavior. "You really want to do this?" Carter asked quietly. "You want to call police on a Navy SEAL for eating hamburger?" "I want to call police on someone who won't leave when asked and claims to be military." Anderson's radio chatter had attracted the attention of other security personnel. Carter could see 2 more guards approaching from different directions, their hands hovering near their radios and pepper spray. The situation was escalating exactly the way Carter had been trained to prevent in urban warfare scenarios. Except this wasn't Kabul or Kandahar. This was his hometown mall, and somehow that made everything worse. The security footage from camera 7, positioned above the food court entrance, captured everything with timestamp precision. Carter sitting peacefully, eating his meal. Anderson approaching aggressively. Carter showing his military ID. Anderson dismissing it without examination. The conversation becoming heated. Other customers stopping to watch. Anderson calling for backup against a decorated war hero whose only crime was eating lunch while black in suburban America. Within minutes, that footage would become evidence in a case that would destroy one career, validate another, and prove that even America's elite warriors aren't immune to racial profiling in their own homeland. David Carter's journey to that mall food court had begun 18 years earlier in the same Richmond neighborhood, where a skinny 12-year-old watched Navy recruitment commercials during Saturday morning cartoons. His father had served 2 tours in Vietnam before coming home to work construction and raised 3 kids on a modest salary. His mother cleaned houses for wealthy families in the suburbs, including some who lived near the very mall where Carter now found himself being treated like a criminal. Growing up, Carter had been the kid who ran 5 miles every morning before school, who studied military history instead of playing video games, who knew by 8th grade that he wanted to serve his country in the most elite unit possible. While his classmates worried about prom dates and college applications, Carter was already planning his path to the Navy SEALs. He'd enlisted at 18, straight out of high school, with test scores that could have earned him a full scholarship to Virginia Tech or UVA. But Carter wasn't interested in college parties and fraternity life. He wanted to earn his place among America's finest warriors. Basic training at Great Lakes Naval Station was challenging but manageable for someone who'd been preparing his entire adolescence. The real test came during Navy SEAL training at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. Of the 187 candidates who started basic underwater demolition SEAL training with Carter's class, only 23 graduated. The 6-month program broke men who thought they were unbreakable. Carter watched classmates quit during Hell Week, during underwater knot tying, during the endless runs in soft sand that left seasoned athletes vomiting on the beach. He'd never quit anything in his life, and he wasn't starting with the thing he wanted most. The instructors pushed him harder than most. They always did with black candidates, testing not just physical capability but mental resilience against the kind of pressure that could break unit cohesion in combat. Carter understood the psychology. In life or death situations, your teammates needed absolute confidence in your character. The training wasn't just about building warriors. It was about building trust. Carter graduated 3rd in his class and was assigned to SEAL Team 6, the Navy's most classified unit, responsible for counterterrorism operations that never appeared in newspapers. His first deployment took him to Afghanistan, where he spent 8 months hunting Taliban leadership in mountain caves and urban compounds. His team captured 17 high-value targets and rescued 4 American hostages. Carter earned his first Bronze Star during a midnight raid that went wrong when intelligence failed to identify a secondary enemy position. His second deployment involved classified operations across 3 countries. Carter couldn't discuss the details with anyone outside his immediate command structure, but the Navy Cross he'd received suggested actions above and beyond normal expectations. His commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Christopher Walker, had written in Carter's evaluation that he'd never seen a young operator display such combination of tactical brilliance and moral courage under extreme pressure. By his 3rd deployment, Carter was leading his own team, responsible for training Afghan special forces and conducting joint operations against terrorist networks. He'd saved American lives, eliminated threats to national security, and earned the respect of everyone who'd served alongside him. His military personnel file contained commendations from generals, CIA directors, and foreign allies who'd witnessed his professionalism firsthand. 18 months ago, Carter's team had been assigned to a classified mission that extended their deployment indefinitely. For security reasons, they'd been unable to take leave, communicate with families, or return stateside. Carter had missed his father's birthday, his sister's wedding, and Christmas with his family. The mission had been successful beyond expectations, but it had cost Carter nearly 2 years of normal life. When his commanding officer finally authorized leave, Carter had exactly 14 days to decompress before reporting for his next assignment. He spent the first 2 days sleeping 16 hours at a time, his body finally relaxing after months of hypervigilance. On day 3, he decided to visit the places that reminded him why he served. The mall had been one of those places. As a teenager, he'd worked at the GameStop during summers, saving money for a car and dreaming about military service. The food court was where he'd eaten lunch during breaks, where he'd studied for his military entrance exams, where he'd kissed his first girlfriend goodbye before leaving for basic training. Now, 8 years later, he'd returned as exactly what he dreamed of becoming: a Navy SEAL with an exemplary service record, a decorated veteran who'd served his country with distinction and honor. He'd imagined this moment differently. Scott Anderson's employment file told a different story. Hired by Westfield Shopping Center 6 years earlier, Anderson had started as a patrol officer responsible for monitoring the parking garage. His initial evaluations were satisfactory, noting his enthusiasm for the work and attention to detail. But as his responsibilities increased, so did the complaints. In year 2, Anderson had been promoted to food court security after the previous guard retired. Within months, complaints began arriving from customers who felt they'd been unfairly targeted. A Hispanic family questioned about their right to be in the mall. An elderly black man asked to show receipts for items he hadn't purchased. A group of Asian teenagers followed through multiple stores and accused of shoplifting without evidence. Each complaint resulted in a meeting with Anderson's supervisor, Jessica Clark, who'd been mall manager for 4 years. Clark had reviewed security footage, interviewed witnesses, and found that Anderson's actions consistently lacked justification. His explanation was always the same. He was being proactive, preventing problems before they occurred, protecting the shopping experience for law-abiding customers. Clark had documented 15 separate incidents in Anderson's file over 4 years. 15 times when Anderson had confronted minority customers without cause. 15 times when his definition of suspicious behavior aligned perfectly with racial stereotypes. 15 warnings that Anderson's biases were creating liability for the mall. But Anderson had never crossed the line into actionable discrimination. He'd never used racial slurs, never explicitly stated racial motivations, never created incidents dramatic enough to justify termination. He was careful with his language, always framing his actions in terms of security and policy enforcement. Mall management had given him additional training, sensitivity workshops, and clear guidelines about customer interactions. None of it had changed his behavior. The pattern was obvious to anyone willing to see it, but Anderson's supervisors had chosen to treat each incident individually rather than recognizing the broader bias at work. They'd hoped that training and warnings would eventually modify his approach. They'd underestimated how deeply his assumptions ran. Anderson genuinely believed he was protecting the mall from criminals. In his mind, crime had a demographic profile, and he was trained to recognize threat indicators. Young black men, especially those who appeared to be loitering, fit that profile. It didn't matter if they were shopping, eating, or simply existing in public spaces. Anderson saw potential threats where others saw paying customers. When he looked at David Carter sitting in the food court, Anderson didn't see a Navy SEAL on well-deserved leave. He didn't see a decorated veteran who'd earned his rest through sacrifice and service. He saw a young black man sitting alone, which triggered every bias Anderson had spent 6 years reinforcing. The tragedy wasn't just Anderson's ignorance. It was the system that had allowed his pattern to continue unchecked for years, creating the conditions for exactly this confrontation. 15 complaints had taught Anderson that his behavior carried no serious consequences. Mall management's failure to address his obvious bias had emboldened him to continue profiling customers. Now those failures were about to collide with a war hero's patience, and neither Anderson nor mall management was prepared for the consequences. Within minutes, the food court transformed into a spectacle. 2 additional security guards flanked Carter's table while Anderson stood with his arms crossed, radiating authority he'd never actually earned. Shoppers pulled out phones, recording what they assumed was a standard security incident. Nobody realized they were documenting the harassment of a decorated war hero. Mall manager Jessica Clark arrived first, her heels clicking against the tile as she approached with the confidence of someone used to resolving customer disputes. She'd dealt with Anderson situations before, always managing to smooth things over with apologies and gift cards. This looked like another routine matter requiring diplomatic cleanup. "What's the situation, Scott?" Clark asked, not bothering to acknowledge Carter. Suspicious individual refusing to cooperate, claims to be military, but his ID looks fake. Won't leave when requested. Clark glanced at Carter, noting his calm demeanor and obvious physical fitness. Something felt different about this confrontation. But Anderson had never been wrong about security threats before. She trusted his judgment. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us," Clark said, her tone polite but firm. "We can sort this out in the security office." Carter held up his military ID again. "Ma'am, I'm Master Chief David Carter, U.S., Navy SEALs. I'm on authorized leave, eating lunch I purchased 17 minutes ago. Your security guard is harassing me without cause." Clark examined the ID briefly. It looked legitimate, but Anderson had explained that fake military credentials were easily obtained online. She'd learned to trust her security team's expertise in these matters. The police arrived as Clark was weighing her options. 2 patrol officers entered the food court with the casual authority of cops responding to a routine disturbance call. They saw what dispatch had described: mall security dealing with an uncooperative individual. Standard procedure was to support mall personnel unless obvious misconduct was occurring. Police Sergeant Isabella Garcia approached first, her hand resting on her radio. 22 years on the force had taught her to read situations quickly. She saw a well-built black man surrounded by security personnel, multiple phones recording, and the tension that preceded either cooperation or confrontation. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," Anderson said immediately. "This individual has been loitering, refusing to leave when asked, and claiming to be military, with obviously fake identification." Garcia looked at Carter, who remained seated despite being surrounded by authority figures. His posture suggested military training, but she'd seen plenty of people fake military bearing to avoid trouble. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with me," Garcia said. The circle was complete. Mall security, management, and police had all aligned against a Navy SEAL whose only crime was eating lunch while black. Police Sergeant Isabella Garcia had been preparing to escort Carter to her patrol car when she noticed something Anderson and Clark had missed. Carter's military ID wasn't just any military identification. The distinctive formatting, security features, and clearance designations indicated Special Operations Command credentials. "Wait," Garcia said, holding up her hand. She'd worked with military personnel during joint training exercises and knew what real SEAL identification looked like. "Let me see that ID again." Carter handed over his credentials without resistance. Garcia examined them carefully, noting the holographic seals, embedded security features, and direct access codes that connected to Pentagon databases. These weren't items available for online purchase. "This is legitimate," Garcia told Anderson and Clark. "These are special operations credentials. You can't fake these." Anderson's confidence wavered, but he's been loitering, acting suspicious. Acting suspicious? Garcia looked around the food court. He's eating lunch, at a table, with food he purchased. She turned to Carter. "Chief, what unit are you with?" "SEAL Team 6, ma'am. Just returned from classified deployment. I'm on 14 days leave before reporting back to base." Garcia pulled out her phone and called the Pentagon verification line, a number she'd used before during military liaisons. The response came back immediately. "Master Chief David Carter, active duty, exemplary service record, currently on authorized leave." Clark's face went white as the implications hit her. "Scott, you said he looked suspicious." "He was just sitting there," Anderson mumbled, his earlier confidence evaporating. "I thought." "You thought what?" Garcia's voice carried the authority of someone who just realized they were witnessing discrimination against a war hero. That a Navy SEAL couldn't eat lunch in a mall? The phones recording the incident had captured everything. The harassment of a decorated serviceman, the dismissal of legitimate military credentials, the assumption that a black man in civilian clothes couldn't possibly be an elite warrior. Anderson's career was about to end in viral infamy. The transformation was immediate and devastating for Scott Anderson. One phone call to the Pentagon had turned him from authority figure to liability in under 60 seconds. Jessica Clark watched her security guard's face crumble as the reality of his mistake became undeniable. "Scott, you're suspended immediately," Clark announced, her voice sharp with barely controlled panic. "Badge, radio, keys. Security will escort you out." Anderson fumbled with his equipment, hands shaking as he realized his 6-year career was ending in public humiliation. "I was just doing my job," he protested weakly. He looked suspicious. "You profiled a Navy SEAL," Sergeant Garcia stated flatly. "A decorated war hero eating lunch. That's not security work, that's discrimination." The crowd that had gathered to watch the confrontation now had their phones aimed at Anderson as he was escorted toward the exit. The viral videos would be online within the hour, tagged with phrases like racist security guard and Navy SEAL harassment. Anderson's face would become synonymous with ignorant bias. Carter remained remarkably calm throughout the reversal, his military discipline evident even as vindication arrived. "Sergeant Garcia, I appreciate you taking the time to verify my credentials properly. Chief Carter, I sincerely apologize. This should never have happened." Garcia's respect for military service was genuine, and she understood the insult Anderson had delivered to a man who'd earned honor through sacrifice. 3 weeks later, Carter filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against Westfield Shopping Center and Scott Anderson personally. The case was straightforward: documented harassment based on racial profiling of a serviceman lawfully using public accommodations. Security footage provided irrefutable evidence of Anderson's behavior and the mall's initial support of his actions. The settlement came quickly: $3.8 million paid to Carter, along with mandatory bias training for all mall security personnel and a public apology acknowledging their failure to properly train staff. Anderson's termination became permanent, and his attempt to find work in security elsewhere failed when background checks revealed the viral incident. Lieutenant Colonel Christopher Walker provided testimony supporting Carter's character and service record. "Master Chief Carter represents the finest qualities of American military service," Walker stated. "The fact that he was treated this way while on leave is an insult to every person who serves this country." Carter donated half his settlement to veteran support organizations, keeping the remainder for his family and future education plans. Anderson moved out of state, unable to find employment that didn't require background checks. The mall implemented comprehensive anti-discrimination policies and hired a diversity consultant. And if you believe that respect should be earned through character and service, not assumed through skin color, then please hit that subscribe button. We're going to keep documenting these patterns. We're going to keep pushing for better. We're going to keep standing with the heroes who deserve honor, not harassment, in the country they've sworn to defend. This isn't just about one security guard or one serviceman. It's about the values we claim to hold and whether we actually live by them.